Hello, my name is Joy and welcome to my channel. And today I want to talk about my personal spiritual awakening. So to start off, I grew up in a religious background. I was Pentecostal, considered to be Pentecostal. I didn't wear my first pair of pants until I graduated high school. We wasn't 100% strict because we was allowed to listen to R&B music, go to the skating ring, play Uno, things like that. But pretty much a religious household is what I grew up in. And I also wasn't sure of my salvation at the time. If I did anything wrong or I felt like I was falling short, I felt like I wasn't saved. So my salvation came and went throughout the week. If I did something I felt was wrong on Wednesday, I was at church Sunday asking for forgiveness and hoping that I wouldn't die in between that time and go straight to hell. So pretty much that was my mindset growing up, even throughout my 20s and my 30s. Nothing too much happened during that time, my 20s and my 30s. Nothing that really challenged me spiritually. It's like whatever I knew during my elementary, high school, college days is really what I stuck to that entire time in my 20s and my 30s. It wasn't until I reached 40, which is what this video is about, is when I started to have challenges to my faith. Challenges to what I believe was true spiritually. So once I turned 40 years old, that was a huge shift in my life. I started a relationship that wasn't the nicest or the kindest relationship. Now, I've had bad relationships in the past that have ended. At that point, 2 failed marriages. I was yet again a single parent. But I have never had a type of relationship like this before that actually challenged me and showed me who I really was. There was a lot of name calling, a lot of verbal abuse. And at the time, I didn't even think it was abuse. I just felt like this person have issues and they just need to be loved. They just need to be understood and supported. And then this person will see that, hey, I am a good person. I'm not out to hurt them. I'm not like the others. But you already know how that ends. That never ended. It stayed the same. And it was just a lot of accusations, a lot of name calling, and a lot of other things that I've cared not to talk about during this time. So that really began my spiritual journey when I was going through that bad relationship. In fact, that's when I knew that I was stronger spiritually than what I thought. Because most times in those type of relationships, the person who is the aggressor likes to break the spirit. This is what I call. It's not really breaking the spirit, but you do know the term that I'm talking about. Break the spirit of the person they are trying to control. That way they can be, I don't know, I'm not too sure if obedient or tired of fighting back or tired of whatever that term is. But I never did that. I never was the type to back down and say, hey, yes, I am this. Yes, I am that. I knew who I was. I knew I was confident, even though at that time I didn't know. But going through this relationship showed me how spiritually strong I was, how strong I was mentally, and I could not be broken. And so that was actually the start of my experience. And at that time, I left my church. I left my religion. Let's put it that way, because we are the church. So we can never leave that. We are the church. We are the temple. So I started questioning why I have to do this, why I have to do that, why I have to follow this rule and this regulation in order to be saved, what people call saved, quote unquote saved. And so at that time, I started questioning my religion. I'm going through a bad relationship. I'm being pushed and challenged on both ends, both physically and spiritually. And I actually grew from that. And from that point is how I started my journey. So during that time of being in a bad relationship, going back and forth, we break up, get together, break up, get together. Still the accusations and you this and you that never stopped. I'm still questioning my religion. I've left pretty much going to the church on a regular basis. And so during that time, my mother was diagnosed with dementia. And at that time, we was living together. And I didn't know much about the disease at the time. And so we did notice that she had some type of impairments that she would have, being forgetful, forgetting to take a shower, just things like that. But she was still her normal, humble self. No, she was still my mother. But we did start noticing some things in her. And so at the time, I did some research, and I wanted to know exactly what could I do to help take care of her. So I was looking up the dementia steps, and like, this is what happens doing this and this and this step. And so once I looked up her steps, like step 4 or 5, however many steps at all, I'm just giving you an example. But I realized that she was actually in her late stage of dementia, and they had predicted that she would have no more than 2.5 years to live. And I was like, wait, 2.5 years? I thought this is something that she would live with until she's 80 or 90. She would be like the mother who's forgetful, but still living to be 80, 90 years old. At that time, she was like 68 or something like that. And so I was really shocked and surprised that they gave her, at that point, 2.5 years to live. And so that was a lot for me to process at that time, because we was living together. And so during that time, when I found it more and more difficult to help care for her, I started looking up ways to help her. What is she experiencing at the time? What does she need at that time? And so I started looking up YouTube videos, articles on Google, and things like that. And so it came across how to take care of a person in the end stages of dementia. Pretty much is what I was looking for, to pretty much help take care of her. And while I was going through that, I saw videos about near-death experiences and the things that they experience. And I've heard of a near-death experience one time in high school, but I've never heard that term. And I've never heard anyone talk about it since then. In the 20 years that, I was on, I heard the first thing when I was in high school. And so I was like, a near-death experience, what is that? So once I started looking at the videos and hearing the different stories and pretty much what they was going through, that is what really sparked my interest in what I call spiritual things. What happens on the other side? What happens on this side? And things like that. And so once my mother had reached the point to where she could no longer speak, she went to go live with my brother, and I would still, go and help take care of her, my aunt and my daughter. And so I'm still looking at videos and about vibrations and frequencies, near-death experiences, all those things. And so it's almost like I went down this binge where I just watched video after video and video, and I was like, wow, is this true? Is that true? It's about reincarnation and things like that, and like you say, frequencies and all of that. I was like, wow, could this really be real? Could this really be true? Because this was far from my religious upbringing. Nothing that I've ever heard about before. Okay, and so during her last year of life, my mother, maybe the last 6 to 7 months of her life, at that point, like I said, she lost the ability to speak. And I was sitting next to her bed. And just to kind of backtrack, once I was, to kind of backtrack, when I was in high school, I used to write poetry and short stories. I knew I wanted to be a writer back in the day, and I pretty much gave up on that dream once I graduated high school. I kind of talked myself out of it, let's put it that way. In fact, I'll probably make another video explaining how that process went, but I pretty much gave that up in high school. I figured I couldn't do it. I wasn't good enough. How was I going to find a publisher? How was I going to make a living off of being a writer? So I pretty much talked my way out of that dream, that goal, which at that point that I didn't know was actually my purpose. So I was sitting next to her bed. And remember, at that time, she lost the ability to speak. So I heard her, not in an audible voice, but I heard my mother say, why don't you start writing again? Or start writing again. And I'm sitting next to her bed, and you might know what I'm talking about, but it wasn't her speaking, but I heard her speaking. More like telepathically or spiritually, however you want to put it. And so I heard, start writing again. And so I looked at her and I was like, start writing again? And I'm like, did I hear this? Or is this something that I just thought up in my head? Now, mind you, I've never thought about writing seriously since high school. Maybe a little bit here and there throughout the years, maybe once or twice, but nothing to the point to where I wanted to actually publish a book. That was like a whole nother level of writing that I never thought that I could do. And so she said, start writing. So, and I knew exactly what she was talking about. And of course, the same fears and doubts that happened then happened at that point too. I was like, how can I write? I started talking myself out of it. And so before she passed, I made that promise. I said, you know what, Mother? I'm going to start writing. I'm going to make that promise to you, and I'm going to start writing. So after I heard her say that, I didn't start writing or anything because I was too, busy caring for her. And so her death is really what sparked my physical journey, because once she passed away, the first thing I wrote was the poem for her funeral. The very first thing that I wrote was the poem for her funeral. And so it was in her obituary, and that was really started my writing journey. And her dementia is really what started my spiritual journey, when I started looking into videos and NDEs and things like that. So I knew then that what I thought was a negative thing, which it was. I mean, it was a hard thing to go through, a bad relationship, my mother having dementia, the passing of my mother. It really led me in the direction that I am now on this spiritual journey of knowing how strong I am, looking up research about spiritual things, writing for the first time in honor of her because of her death, writing that poem in honor for her. And then after that, I made that promise. And because the doubt came back in after her funeral, the doubt came back in, almost like the fear came back in. But I made that promise to her, and I knew that I was going to do it. And so I pushed aside all those things. And then after that, I published my first book of poetry, maybe a year later after she passed. It could have been sooner if I didn't have those doubts and fears that crept back in, but I ended up pushing through, still studying spiritual things, still being on a spiritual journey, but I pushed through. I wrote my first book of poetry. And then after that was my second book about spirituality. And that book was actually also a vision that was given to me while I was praying and meditating one night. The whole book is a vision, which is definitely for another video. But that was really what sparked my spiritual journey. A bad relationship, the death of a parent, at least in my personal journey, is what sparked me and pushed me to go on this journey of life, on this path for me. So that is my story on how I started my spiritual journey. It started out of a bad relationship. It started out of the death of a parent. But before that, I was just lukewarm. I guess you want to call it lukewarm. I was not pushed. I was not challenged. I was just living my life day to day and just being in doubt, being in fear. And because of those things, because of that bad relationship, because of the death of my mother, those things is what helped push me to start this journey. It pushed me on a different path. It showed me how strong I was. So even though it was a tragedy, God, Heavenly Father, the universe used it for my good. And that is my testimony today. On a separate video, I will explain how I end up writing my second book and a dream that I had that pushed that along as well, and helped me reveal some things that I didn't know about myself. So again, thank you for watching. This is my journey. You be good and be blessed.